Hello and welcome back to another video. Today is very exciting as I will be painting my very first Artist Resin Horse. His name is Turbulence and he's sculpted by Aaron Chandler of Horse and Heifer Hobbies. I did get him secondhand and he had a weird smell to him, which was so interesting to Miss Pecan that she decided to lick him. Horse. But after a few days in baking soda and a bath, he was good to go. I like his tail, but it did have some patching, so I decided to sculpt him a new one. This will also help him be less likely to tip over. So the first thing to do is to cut off his tail with my Dremel. I make sure to wear my mask, eye protection, gloves, and some long sleeves. Now this being my first time working with a resin, I knew they had metal rods in the legs, but I didn't realize they were also in the tail. So I nearly had a heart attack when sparks shot out. Luckily my cutting disc is meant for metal, so it did cut through, but I made the rest of the cuts around the wire. Once I cut the part attached to the leg, I was able to snap it all off. I clean up the leg where the tail touched. While I'm at it, I drill in an air hole to make sure air won't cause bloating in the future. Off camera, I sanded down any imperfections from casting. I use 150 grit and go down to 400. He was a lot easier to sand than a briar would be, but that might not be the case for all resins. I also drilled into the tail stump so I can add in the armature wire. I like to leave a little bit of the old tail so that the new one is extra strong. I bend my wire around until it's looking about how I want it. I harden it into place with my Aves 2-part epoxy. With my extra epoxy, I smooth over rough areas and pinholes. I use 70% alcohol to get it really smooth. Once that all hardened overnight, I cut off the excess and position the wire. The tail will be flowing out at different points, so I add more wire. I attach it with some floral wire to keep it from sliding before I can add epoxy. I pat it with some aluminum foil to add volume. I use hot glue to hold everything into place, as well as to build up where I want the hair with more precision. Now I can flatten and add the pieces of epoxy. I build it up keeping in mind the flow of the tail. Once I smooth it with rubbing alcohol, I go in with my X-acto knife to add some detail. I use the silicone tool to define the sections and flow of the hair. I smooth it with a bristle brush dipped in alcohol. make smaller noodles as I go further down. Another plus of making your own tail is adding pieces flowing off that would be hard to make with a mold. Next, I can prime with my Duplicolor sandable primer. I may have been a little close here, but it's okay, I can fix anything when I go over with my final sanding. So off camera, I sand and prime again. Once that's completely dry, it's time for painting. For color, I want to do a bay roan with Sabino patterns that Criollos can have. You may recognize this combo from my Pegasus video. My tastes haven't changed much. With my Azteca airbrush, I cover the primer with a few layers of white to make the lighter colors more vibrant. I'm using Model Air acrylic, so I don't need to thin it too much. Now this was before I figured out how to widen the spray of my airbrush, so don't mind the tiny spray. At least it made for good details. I work light to dark, so I paint the areas that will be lightest with this orange tan. Next, I fill in the medium areas with a darker tan. I use a hairdryer on a low setting to speed up the drying between layers. Next I can go in with a darker brown to add shading. I did consider keeping him a chestnut because he was looking pretty nice, but nah, I love my roans too much. I had a white with a blue tint to the back for a roan effect, which definitely looks crazy in this stage, but hang in there with me. Now I can add in the black points and hair. So here's the final airbrushed look. I seal it off camera with my Mr. Superclear matte spray so it can be handled for the next part. Now I can add the hairs to make the roaning. I make sure to look at plenty of references to get the direction right. I'm using a Prismacolor pencil with a sharpener close by. As you probably noticed, this is pretty tedious, so I find it helpful to just put on a show or music and zone out. But not too much, because you have to remember all the hair direction. made sure to seal each side with Mr. Superclear in between herring so I wouldn't rub it off with my grubby fingers. About halfway through, I accidentally yoinked him off of a table and he acquired some paint rubs, so I sand down any unevenness with my 400 grit sandpaper. Then I matched the color and painted some thin layers of acrylic. Once he was back to normal, I finished up the rest of the herring. Now it's time for the Sabino pattern, which is easier with the herring already mapped out. I'm using a light blue pencil to give a tint to the edge. It gives the whiter transition shade into the red hair, helping it to look blended like it would be in real life. I'm using a bunch of different references for the shape and kind of combining them. Sabino is definitely my favorite Pinto type. I just really like all the jagged edges and roning it produces. I blend into the solid areas with my white pencil. With all the penciling finally done, I can fill in more space and build up the white with my Golden Brand acrylic paint. I thinned it with water as to not get brush strokes. I need a lot of layers to cover up the black legs. I go ahead and paint the black on the mane, tail, and muzzle so I can bring the white markings onto the mane. I'm using thinned Liquitex acrylic and do 3 layers. Thinning also helps get into all the little crevices. Now I can get back into adding the white. I make his little blaze. I do end up going back and making it bigger, but for now it's just a classic blaze and snip. Next I can add the white into the mane. I go in thin streaks starting from the base of the mane, making sure I follow the flow of the sculpt. I add a layer of very thinned down white over the edges to give it some transition. For the hooves I paint the 3 on the white legs this sandy color. I do 4 coats for full coverage. I blend white from the top of the hoof and under the hoof touching the frog. I also use a stiff dry brush for details, going horizontally with white and then with a dark brown. I also shade the bottom with the dark brown. Next I go over vertically with the sand color. I add in the striping with a dark gray. I do the same for the black hoof, but only with white and no striping. I go back over all of them with more white at the top. Before I forget, I add the chestnuts. To start the eyes off, I paint them white. I shape the outside with black and slowly fill in the eye. His eyes are a dark brown, so I add a ring around the pupil, and I put a tan highlight on the bottom. I paint in a tiny eye shine with white. He has a very fierce bite face going on. Before I can paint the inside of the mouth, I paint a white base. I yellow the teeth and add a little brown to the middle of them. For the inner skin and tongue, I use a light pink. After sealing with matte spray, I blush his little nose with eyeshadow. I remove any excess with my kneaded eraser. Can't forget the chin. I do 2 layers of this. Off camera, I sealed with Testors spray lacquer to seal it all in with a satin finish. Lastly, I can gloss the eyes, mouth, and nose with my Liquitex Gloss. And now we're all done! Time for the final result. Here's the before. And here's the after. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. Make sure to boop that like button and subscribe for more projects.